Should I start, sir?
Yes.
Good evening, respected President, Secretary, and office bearers, teachers, and my dear friends. Myself, Patan Aisha Siddiqa, final year, undergraduate student of Vinayaka Mission Medical College, Karaikal. Today, myself and my friend Ramya and Hari are going to discuss about an interesting case, interesting case of fever with anemia, hepatosplenomegaly, and lymphadenopathy. Before I start on with the topic proper, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to President, Secretary, and other office bearers of the IAP for giving us this platform. I extend my gratitude to Dr. N. Singarvelu sir, Professor of Department of Pediatrics of Vinayaka Mission Medical College, Karaikal, who has kindly consented to be the chairperson for today's session. I also extend regards to Dr. B. Srilata ma'am, Assistant Professor in Pediatrics, Vinayaka Mission Medical College, Karaikal, and Dr. V. Anand, Senior Assistant Professor of Pediatrics, Thuthukudi Medical College, for being the moderators of today's session. I thank all the enthusiastic and knowledgeable teachers who have joined today to take part in our discussion. I thank each and every one of you for your sincere encouragement. I thank my department pediatrics and my Dean Ma'am of Vinayaka Mission Medical College. Thanks to all my friends who are here to join in this discussion. Thank you.
Yes, proceed.
Today my topic is a case of fever, anemia, hepatosplenomegaly with lymphadenopathy. A 9-year male named Rahul, residing on Tiruvarur, came brought by mother whose reliability is fairly good, presenting with complaints of fever since 21 days, malaise since 10 days, abdominal distension since 10 days, and swelling in neck since 10 days. History of presenting illness. Child was apparently normal 3 weeks back. Child, de- Child developed fever, which was acute in onset, intermittent in nature, high grade fever, not associated with chills or rigors, no diurnal variation, relieved with medications, not associated with night sweats. Malaise, insidious in onset, progressive in nature, abdominal distension noticed 10 days after onset of fever. Distension was insidious in onset, progressive in nature, involving the upper abdomen, associated with the dragging sensation of the left side. Swelling in the neck, initially noticed on the left side around the same time as abdominal distension, subsequently on the right side, progressive, predominantly in the upper part of the neck, not associated with pain, difficulty in breathing or swallowing.
Okay. So, what
Yes,
on
ma'am.
the concept of upper abdominal distension, you know?
Ma'am,
Possible of upper abdominal distension.
organomegaly, ma'am.
Okay. Any other differential diagnosis?
Upper abdominal distension. What all the possibilities? You said organomegaly. Okay, good. What other thing other than
Like, sir, like uniform, fat, fluid.
That are all causes uniform distension. Predominantly upper abdominal distension, as you said, organomegaly and visceral dilatation. Any viscera, hollow visceral
viscera is
dilatation.
there in the epigastric region, mainly which can get bloated with the air, distended. Okay. Second thing, you told about the fever. Fever for nearly 21 days, the patient. How long the fever was even after hospitalization, whether the fever continued till now, the patient is having fever till your date of eliciting history. So if so, what do you call this type of fever? What terminology we use when the fever lasts for more than, of course, 3 weeks, 21 days, according to you? What terminology we can generally call when a fever lasts for a longer period and the child has come to you after 21 days, not being fully diagnosed? Because usually when fever occurs, within a week's time, we will be able to find out the cause and treat, and child will be all right. But here, fever is presenting for more than 3 weeks. Is it not?
Yes.
What terminology we will call generally it is? Under which heading we can bring into this?
So I would also
Anand,
like
sir?
to ask Dr. Aisha, one more important history. Was this child evaluated during this 21 days anywhere as a
Anywhere.
OPD or was admitted in some other hospital?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. First 11 days they were showing outside some private and government hospitals, sir.
Okay.
After that, they came to our college.
So was any investigation taken during that time frame?
Sir, mother didn't have any medications what the child took. Nothing mother was having, sir.
Investigation. Any
Investigations, blood tests, any blood tests, investigations were taken?
So we asked, they told no, nothing. But some
Okay.
medications we took from outside hospitals like that.
Okay.
What does why sir is asking you put as a high grade fever? Child must be sick if the fever continues to be high for 11 days. No, they might have tempted to do some. Whoever is seeing outside, treating the child when the child is not improving within 3-4 days. Usually the general dictum is any fever first 3 days we don't do any investigation because it could be a viral fever which could. When fever is not subsiding even after 3-4 days and patient being treated outside for 11 days, so our sir is asking whether any, so your mother is not sure and the investigation was not done. Okay, good. On 11th day, it got admitted in our institution. After that also, fever is continuing, or after our admission in our institution, fever is controlled. This is more important. Prior to any symptom, you must divide in two ways, prior to hospitalization and post-hospitalization. Okay. Anand sir, anything you?
Yes, sir. So because that would actually help you to come at a diagnosis that our professor was trying to make.
1 minute. Ismail sir, please mute. Ismail sir. Okay, proceed sir. Anand sir, proceed. Anand sir, you can proceed sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes sir.
Because the points I was trying to make was about fever of unknown origin. So there is a terminology called fever of unknown origin.
Sir, Ismail sir, please Ismail sir. I'll call him and ask him to mute because we cannot mute him.
Yes, muted, sir. Yes, muted.
Muted. Okay. Now we proceed, sir.
Yeah. So that is a point our professor was trying to make. So this particular fever would come under a condition called fever of unknown origin.
Fever of unknown origin. That is more important. Yes.
Yeah. So that the definition actually says that it should be of 3 weeks duration and at least 1 week of hospitalization and all the basic investigation should have been done. So that's what I was asking you about the investigations, right? And one more history about the fever would be like, was it a continuous fever? It was an intermittent fever according to your history. So how was the child in the afebrile phase? So that would again give us a good idea about the nature of fever. So whether the child was lethargic even in the afebrile phase or was active and playing around. And only when the fever was there, the child was very sick. So that history is also an important history, right?
Very good point, because if the child is active, alert in between fever, it could be simple viral fever. if the child is sick, in spite of fever being controlled, because fever temperature could have been controlled by your antipyretic measures. But if the child is not active, lethargic, as you said, only on 10 days, but 11 days child was probably, they were not very clearly knowing about it. But after, for the past 10 days, child is having malaise and other things you put. So what sir is trying to, all viewers must be very clear that when fever prolongs after a week time, then you should be very cautious. You have to be in mind and openly what could be the cause for fever, for which the terminology of fever of unknown origin, which has got its own criteria. When you put this criteria in mind, then you will be able to think of various differential diagnoses. On your further history also should focus where we are going to land. Okay, so with this she has clearly told that this child has got a acute prolonged fever, probably of fever of unknown origin, because it was treated 11 days outside. They have not come to a conclusion. That is why the child has come to a teaching hospital. There also for the past 10 days they are doing all investigation. Let us see how it is going on. Okay, proceed.
Abdominal distension noticed 10 days after onset
Okay,
of
you told that. Oh, yes.
distension was insidious and the slide
Oh.
history of loss of appetite and loss of weight present in the last 10 days, history of breathlessness and minimal exertion.
So here your answer is there. Dr. Anand sir was asking, how was the child? See, the child was losing weight. It means that child was not normal. Even though child had fever, child was not able to take food and it was losing weight for the past 10 days. It means that fever has got some significance. From this you can come to a conclusion. Then proceed.
History of sir, yes, sir. History of breathlessness on minimal exertion present since 10 days. It started as breathlessness on moderate exertion and progressed to dyspnea and even minimal exertion at present. It is not associated with cough or chest retraction, chest pain, and palpitation. No history of rash, joint pain, and bone pain. No history of bleeding from injection sites. Bowel and bladder habits are normal with normal color of urine and stools.
So as a child progresses, you could know that the child is losing its weight and also child is having dyspnea. So child is not normal. So it is gradually going sick. So it means the disease is progressing, worsening. Okay.
Okay, this breathlessness with cough and chest retraction, which system will you go for?
Respiratory system, ma'am.
Okay, what about chest pain?
There's no
Chest pain,
cough.
can you have in? Oh, yes.
It can be both respiratory as well as
Cardiac.
cardiac. Okay, chest pain with other palpitation, syncope and all that, you attribute it to cardiac. Chest pain, everything will tell you whether it is respiratory system which is involved or the cardiac system is involved.
Well, in respiratory system, why the child gets chest pain? What could be the cause for chest pain in the respiratory system? Do you get pain in pneumonia?
Yes.
Do you get pain in pneumonia?
No.
When which area of lung involved, you will get pain.
Which is the pain sensitive area of the lung?
Pain sensitive area. Which layer? Pleura or parenchyma?
Yes, sir.
Pleura, sir.
Pleura. Which part of pleura? Is it visceral? The pleura has got two layers, no? Visceral, parietal. Which is pain sensitive?
Visceral, sir.
So if the patient complains of chest pain in association with the respiratory system involvement, it means that he has got pleuritic involvement. That is what madam was telling. If it is cardiac pain, chest pain, it is due to what? If the patient, with the child is having some cardiac problem with the chest pain, what could be the reason? One, it can be ischemic pain or it can be due to pericarditis. Both can produce pain. So you should analyze the symptoms. That is why madam is asking you whether chest pain. Okay.
History of intake of oral and injectable medications for fever from local doctors in the last 2 weeks. Details of medication not known to the mother. After admission to our hospital in the 3rd week of onset on illness, fever continued. No history of blood transfusion, no history of recent travel.
Yes, see.
Past history, no history of similar episodes in the past, no history of previous hospitalization.
So this clearly rules out that this child is not suffering from any chronic recurring illness.
Yes, sir.
Are you clear? So it is not suffering from any chronic recurring illness where child may have recurrent attacks of fever and all these things. So this is started recently for the past 3 to 4 weeks. Now we have to think of how this an acute condition with the prolongation of fever and other symptoms. Okay. Yes. Any comments, sir? Anand, sir?
So just one point, sir. In this particular history of present illness, you were asking about the history of recent travel, right? So what were you thinking about?
Sir, any endemic diseases like
Yes.
Yes, tell.
Kala Azar, any like Kala Azar, like
Yeah. So endemic areas, yeah, in coastal areas, we could be thinking more about malaria, right? So malaria.
So malaria will be more common than Kala Azar because in some areas malaria is very endemic. So as such, we put this that too in coastal areas, it is more likely to have. So okay. Some recent history of travel will help whether the child would have occurred an infection which was endemic in that particular area, which could have been a chronic infection, which can be. Yes.
Okay.
Antenatal history. Second born to non-consanguineous parents. Mother was 23 years at the time of conception of this child. Spontaneous conception confirmed in the 2nd month of missed cycles by urine test. She was booked and immunized at the government hospital of Tiruvarur. Folic acid tablets were started from the time confirmation of pregnancy.
Okay, good. You have specifically mentioned about the age of the mother at the time of conception. Does it have any relevance to this case? What for you asked about the age of the child? I mean, age of the mother. Any idea? Just or as a routine you asked?
Like usually like mother's age, if it is more than 30 years, Down syndrome is common, so it's for that sake mother's age.
Good. Suppose child is mother age is very aged mother, child might be suffering from some chromosomal disorders, especially Downs. So where the immunologically child will be depressed, would have got recurrent infection and other things also can occur. Okay, which will go. Good.
First trimester, no history of hyperemesis gravidarum, no history of fever with rash, joint pain or post-auricular painful swelling, no history of post-exposure to ionizing radiations, no history of intake of medications other than folic acid, dating scan done and reported as normal.
Yes, proceed.
Second trimester, quickening felt in the 5th month of gestation, no diabetes mellitus, pregnancy-induced hypertension, thyroid diseases, kidney, heart or lung diseases complicating pregnancy. 2 doses of tetanus toxoid given, started on iron and folic acid supplementations with which the mother was compliant. Anomaly scan was done and reports were revealed as normal. Mother's blood group was B positive.
So from this antenatal history, we are fairly ruling out any chromosomal disorders and other things, because they have done anomalies scan also in the history there. Okay, so this rules out some chromosomal disorders or genetic disorders which could the child might be suffering from. Okay.
Third trimester, weight gain during pregnancy not known to the mother, but nothing abnormal was cited by the examining doctors. She continued to perceive fetal movements throughout the third trimester, continued to take iron, calcium, and folic acid tablets. Fetal well-being scan was done and reported as normal. No history of abnormal vaginal bleeding. Natal history. It was a full-term normal vaginal delivery following spontaneous onset of labor. Delivered at Government Hospital, Tiruvarur. Baby cried immediately after birth. Birth weight was 3.1 kg. Baby handed over to mother within half an hour. Baby passed urine and meconium within 24 hours after birth. Neonatal history. Baby was started on direct breastfeeds half an hour after birth and was sucking well at breast. No history of giving prelactal feeds. There was no yellowish or bluish discoloration of skin or mucosa. Baby was kept beside the mother till discharge on day 5 of delivery and did not require special neonatal care. Umbilical cord dried and fell on day 9 of life. There was no bleeding or discharge from the base. No history of any application on the umbilical base.
So
has
yes, madam. Yes,
got
madam.
anything to do with the upper abdominal distension now? Umbilicus in the neonatal period. Has it got anything to do with the present abdominal distension? Is there any possibility?
Ma'am, like umbilical cord at that time, any infections or
And
Infection or
ma'am, hello. And in case of immunodeficiency syndrome, also like umbilical cord will fall later.
Yeah. So madam is
Okay.
asking about any manipulation with the umbilicus.
manipulation, what?
Yeah. So any procedure done in the umbilicus?
no,
What?
sir.
Yes.
What procedure will we
You had
do?
mentioned, no?
Catheterization, umbilical cord.
Yes, umbilical catheterization. But all that
Distension or discharge indicating infection. What can it do with the present upper abdominal distension?
Ma'am, once again, ma'am, your volume got cut in.
no. What correlation with this umbilical discharge and umbilical procedure for upper abdominal distension?
Sir, portal hypertension, sir.
Portal hypertension. Oh, okay, good.
So exactly extrahepatic portal vein obstruction.
Portal vein obstruction.
Yeah.
Good, sir. Yes. So from your history regarding the antenatal and natal history, the mother is well booked case and properly evaluated case. This is more important. So she has not given any room for that because she has done anomaly scan and all that and delivered in a government hospital institution, and postnatal period was uneventful. Everything was uneventful. So we are completely forgetting about her. This antenatal, birth and neonatal, uneven. So it is even free normal. Okay, proceed.
A developmental history. Mother does not remember the age of development of each of the milestone, but says that it was at par with the age matched neighborhood children. Average school performance prior to illness, not resume school after the onset of illness.
How can you relate developmental history to an abdominal problem? Upper abdominal distension, fever, can that be related to the development history?
In case of hepatic encephalopathy, ma'am.
Development
The-
history.
Developmental.
Present CNS complaints.
Ma'am, in case of storage disorders,
Yeah, very good.
Good.
Okay.
there'll be
If it is a chronic storage disorders, can have organomegaly with abdominal distension. Okay.
distension and delayed milestones.
Delayed milestones, yes.
Dietary history. Prior to the illness, intake was normal and took mixed diet. From 24-hour recall method, the calories expected are 1640, which observed is 870 kilocalories, and the deficit is 770 kilocalories. Proteins expected are 21.6 grams, and observed is 16 grams, and the deficit is 5.6 grams.
But here, the most important thing is pre-morbid diet. What was the diet pattern of calories and proteins prior to the child becoming ill? Because you observe for the past 24 hours, the child is already sick, child is losing its appetite, child is not able to take anything. Naturally, whatever calories and proteins, definitely there will be a long gap. But we are worried whether the child has got a chronic malnutrition. So for which you should mention the child was normal prior to the illness that you are given, and you should ask the dietetic history prior to the onset of the illness. Was she taking adequate calories and protein? That is more important. So whenever you talk about dietary history, diet is a pre-morbid diet before the child becomes sick. And of course, what is now, because it is for the past 21 days, child is very sick, and naturally caloric and protein intake will be, child may not be able, even if we offer, child may not be able to take because of their sickness. Okay, you should have mentioned about the pre-morbid diet. From this, we can think that whether the child is having a chronic malnutrition or not. That we can see. Okay.
Immunization history. Completely immunized according to National Immunization Schedule. Last vaccine was given at 5 years of age in school. Family.
As undergraduates, you all should be well versed in immunization schedule. We will be asking, you will be asked about national immunization schedule and what are all the newer vaccines. And also you should have some idea what IAP, Indian Academy of Pediatrics vaccination schedule, also as an undergraduate you should be knowing. And certain vaccines will be implemented by some states. So that also you will be knowing from your area, what are the other vaccines. Say for example, in our Tamil Nadu, we are included rotavirus vaccine for the past few years. And we are giving, and what other vaccines are peculiar to our, apart from national immunization schedule vaccine? What other vaccine is being given here? Any idea? So we are giving pneumococcal vaccines, mainly for children of low birth weight, less than 1.5 kg, delivered in a government hospital, are given pneumococcal vaccine. So this is, but these vaccines are included, some few states, but many states are not included. So your immunization is the important tool to prevent diseases. All undergraduates should be well aware of about that. What are all the common vaccines used in national immunization schedule, and what are the optional vaccines or newer vaccines available? Okay. Anything, Madam Srilata ma'am?
And JE vaccine is given in rice field areas like Tanjavur, Tiruvarur.
Yeah.
Specific to the Japanese encephalitis.
Family history. Non-consanguineous parents. Elder sibling 3 years older than this boy died at 8 years of age due to prolonged fever with shivers and loss of consciousness. Got lumbar puncture done. Details not known to the mother. Maybe CNS infection. No history of similar illness in any other family members. Socioeconomic history. According to modified Kuppuswamy scale, this family belongs to lower middle class 3. Environmental history. Lives in a thatched house, 2 rooms and a separate kitchen, poorly ventilated, common toilet, overcrowding inside and outside present, potable water for drinking, closed sewage, municipal waste disposal system present, no pet animals or birds. Contact history, no history of contact with open adult pulmonary tuberculosis patient. Treatment history, treatment with oral and injectable medications for the last 2 weeks for fever and malaise. No history of intake of native medications. No history of prolonged drug intake prior to the onset of this illness. Allergy history, no history of allergy to specific medication or food.
So
Good. Here,
what drug you expect in the if there was specifically a prolonged drug intake? What drugs could cause fever with upper abdominal distension after intake, prolonged intake of certain medications? What can you name a few?
In case of hepatomegaly, like rifampicin, isoniazid causes like hepatomegaly, and like in case of hepatomegaly with lymphadenopathy, there will be like anti-epileptic drugs like phenytoin, all this.
Anticonvulsant.
Dapsone.
good. Anticonvulsant drugs. Okay.
Yes.
Any other antibiotic can cause this type of manifestation, though not fever?
Just think.
Okay.
Yes, proceed. Matan, you can proceed.
Environmental history.
No.
Summary of
Yes. Summary. Yes.
Summary of history. A 9-year-old male child, second born to non-consanguineous parents, presented with prolonged fever, progressively worsening malaise, upper abdominal distension, bilateral neck swelling associated with loss of weight and appetite without bleeding manifestations or jaundice. System involved is abdomen. Differential diagnosis.
Wait. Before going for differential diagnosis, you should think in your mind. When you classify this as fever of unknown origin because of a prolonged fever, here you have to remember two things. One, it can be a common presentation of an uncommon fever, uncommon diagnosis, uncommon illness, or it can be an uncommon manifestation of a common illness. So you have to approach this way. When a fever of unknown origin, you have put the label because the fever obviously lasting for more than 3 weeks. Of course, even if it is more than a week or 2 weeks, when with a basic investigation, even after hospitalization in the institution, we are not able to arrive at diagnosis. Fever has not been controlled. So it may be a common manifestation of an uncommon disease, or it can be uncommon manifestation of common disease. These two things you have to keep in mind when you offer or when you think a differential diagnosis. So you have to first always think of a common problem. What could be the common issues which we come across? Then we can think of uncommon things also. Okay. Yes. See.
System involved is abdomen. Differential diagnosis are infections, malignancy, connective tissue disorders, and others. In infections, infectious mononucleosis, HIV, disseminated tuberculosis, brucellosis, toxoplasmosis, Kala Azar, malaria, cytomegalovirus, typhoid. In malignancy, leukemia and lymphoma. Connective tissue disorders like systemic lupus erythematosus, systemic onset juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Others, Langerhans cell histiocytosis, hemolytic anemia, and thalassemia.
So here, as you rightly told, the common manifestation, any infection will have a prolonged fever like tuberculosis, typhoid can have, malaria, infection, of course, lymphadenopathy is infectious mononucleosis. Of course, cytomegaloid, toxoplasmosis, you can add for. So these are all some infections which can, if it is not properly diagnosed, can have a prolonged. So malignancies, fever may be a manifestation. So fever is a common, but immediately we may not think in terms of malignancy for any fever. But in a prolonged fever, we have to keep in mind malignancy also, and of course, connective tissue disorders, these two things.
Dr. Raisha? Yeah, sir. So Dr. Raisha, can you discuss me the points for and against for each of your differential diagnoses?
Yes.
Say, for example, in infections, from the history so far, whatever you have discussed, can you say me points in favor of infections and against infection?
Sir, in infectious mononucleosis, like for history, fever and malaise and lymphadenopathy and also hepatosplenomegaly will see in infectious will be present in infectious mononucleosis also. So
Yeah.
HIV,
But loss of appetite and loss of weight may not be expected. Yeah.
yes, sir. That
Okay.
And child was also dyspneic, you told, probably if it is anemic or other things, also which may not be a feature in, common feature in it. Yes.
Yeah. So what about disseminated tuberculosis? Is that a possibility?
yes, sir.
Yeah. So so disseminated tuberculosis may present like a lymphadenopathy, but is there any specific to the lymphadenopathy in tuberculosis?
Yes, sir. Like
Nated lymph nodes will be there, sir, enlarged.
What is specific for tuberculosis? Sir is asking. Suppose you say nodes are enlarged. What will be the specific thing which will make you to suspect this could be a tuberculosis? What will be the type? Because you are going to do in general examination. Then you have to say
yes,
multiple foam
no
matted.
mated.
Oh, that is more specific of tuberculosis, no?
Yes.
Discharging sinuses may also be there.
May also be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So those things you should be keeping in mind when you're going for your general examination, right? Fine. And you asked histories about animal rearing also, like so that is for brucellosis, I suppose.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that was not there in this case. And leukemia is very much possible differential diagnosis. But the points against were like there were no petechial spots, I suppose, in your history. No bleeding manifestations. Bone pain was also not there.
Joint pain.
Yeah, so it was also not there. Fine. Yeah, so it's a good summary of history. You can proceed with the examination.
There is the purpuric spot in history, sir, but there is no bleeding manifestation.
Sir,
So we have leukemia in our differential diagnosis.
Oh, okay, fine. Right.
general examination, child is conscious, tired, sick looking, lying on the couch in left lateral position, pallor present, noted in conjunctiva, not appreciable in the palms. No icterus, clubbing, cyanosis, pedal or sacral edema, bilateral non-tender discrete firm lymph nodes of upper deep cervical and posterior cervical groups palpated. Size is 2.5 to 3 centimeters each. Other lymph nodes are lower deep cervical, axillary, epitrochlear, inguinal are not palpable.
So you
So
start
any
question you
specific
answer. Yes, madam.
Any specific reason why the child was lying on the left lateral position?
Now you have mentioned that it is left lateral position. Why? Anything?
Anything can you attribute?
Uh,
In the history, you told one point, right?
Yes, ma'am. Dyspnea.
Dyspnea? What way?
Sensation side. So he had some dragging sensation on the left side, right?
Left side, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Maybe something he could feel comfortable lying down on the left lateral position, or it could be just at the time of examination he was there. assuming that position. Both could be a possibility.
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you examine sacral edema in this child? Did you look for not only pedal edema but also sacral edema?
What's the specific significance of sacral edema? When the patient is bedridden,
Probably not ambulant.
But
patient is
dependent area,
no. If
So
you
if not ambulant, probably. That is why we also checked for, you also had checked for sacral edema.
yes.
as madam told, the positioning will give you some clue. So suppose patient is comfortable on left lateral position. It means that if the patient has got lesion on the left side of the either lung or the upper abdomen spleen is enlarged. So she will be comfortable instead of it will be compressed against it so that it will not have much movement. So she will not have the pain. Suppose if we turn the opposite side, then the pain will be more and the discomfort will be more. So it is an important clue, as rightly madam told, whether just like that patient lied on left lateral or specifically she was comfortable on that particular position, you have to attach some significance also. That is why in general examination, position, attitude of the patient is very important and your examination. Yes.
And yeah, so just one more point.
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned about a non-tender, discrete, firm lymph nodes, right? So and size is also 2.5 to 3 centimeters. So what do you make out of all these findings with the lymphadenopathy now?
So it's a generalized lymphadenopathy, sir.
Yes. What answer what sir was asking initially? Suppose what you thought of, which are likely you may rule out at this point of time. I think we will not attach much significance to this nodal enlargement for certain diseases.
Yeah. So what do you expect in an acute infection? So how will be the node?
Lymph nodes will be tender in case of acute infection.
Yeah.
And
So,
like in this case, the size is like 2.5 to 3 centimeters, sir. And like upper deep cervical and posterior cervical group are involved, which is not contiguous, sir. Like so, it comes under generalized lymphadenopathy category, sir, instead of like advanced significant.
Very good.
and size of the node is also important. In cervical group, anything more than 1 centimeter is supposed to be a significant node. So this is a significant lymphadenopathy, right? Yeah, you can proceed. Yeah.
Vital signs, pulse 112 per minute, regular in rhythm, high volume, not collapsing, no specific character, felt well in all peripheral vessels, no radioradial, radiofemoral delay. Respiration 24 per minute, abdominothoracic, blood pressure 104.
Why do you say radiofemoral delay? What is the significance of radiofemoral delay? What you are having in your mind, suppose telling radiofemoral delay? So coarctation of aorta which okay. That is.
Blood pressure 104 by 66 mmHg in the right upper limb in supine posture with age appropriate cuff. Temperature 100.9 degree Fahrenheit measured with oral thermometer. SpO2 98% at room A. General anthropometry. Weight expected is 29 kgs, observed is 17 kgs, percentage is 58.6%, height in centimeters expected is 131 centimeters, observed is 125 centimeters, percentage is 95.4%, underweight with normal height, probably illness induced, SMR is stage 1.
So what does it suggest? weight has grossly reduced, it's 58%. Height is almost normal.
Yes, sir.
So what does it convey you?
Sir, some illness induced.
So it is relatively acute malnutrition. Where in
Okay.
acute malnutrition, your height will not be affected, only weight will be affected.
Perfect.
If it is a chronic malnutrition, both height and weight will be affected. If she is a chronic malnutrition with a gross reduction in weight, it is acute or severe malnutrition. And you should also know what is short stature. That also you should be able to differentiate. So you put SMR. What is SMR?
Sexual maturity
80.
rate.
Okay. Yes. Stage 1. Okay. Say.
Head to foot examination. Head and hair are normal. Face normal. Eyes pallor present. Ears, nose normal. Dental care is present in the oral cavity. Left mandibular and maxillary molar teeth. Multiple purpuric spots in the front and back of the trunk present. Chest wall, upper limbs, including hands, normal. BCG scar is seen. Abdominal wall, lower limbs are normal. Systemic examination of abdomen. Inspection. Abdomen is distended, more in the upper part. Flanks are free. Umbilicus is normal. All quadrants move well with respiration. No visible pulsation. Dilated veins are above and below the umbilicus. No visible peristaltic movements. No scar or stoma. Genitalia normal. Renal angles free. Palpation. Abdomen is soft. No tenderness observed during palpation. Direction of blood flow in the dilated veins is towards the umbilicus. Here is the
Good. Yes.
dilated veins. So this in the circle.
What is the significance of noticing the direction of flow of veins? Ramya, you can tell why.
Sir, to say if it is IVC obstruction, like the flow will be like
From below, flow will be from below to upwards, sir. In
Yeah.
IVC obstruction, in SVC obstruction, flow will be from upwards to below, and if it is in the liver cell failure, far away from the umbilicus, sir.
It will be away from the umbilicus.
Umbilicus cap put.
Yes.
So what does this direction tell you? It is towards the umbilicus, you said.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
So what is significant?
It is normal, like
Yes.
flow is
Normally dilated without any obstruction.
obstruction.
Okay.
Yes, proceed.
Liver is palpable 4 centimeters below the right costal margin. Borders normal, non-tender. Surface is smooth and consistency is firm. Spleen is palpable 5 centimeters below the left costal margin. Felt up to the umbilicus. Notch felt, non-tender. Surface is smooth, firm in consistency. Both testes normal in shape and size. Percussion. Liver span 11 centimeters, no fluid thrill, shifting dullness or puddle sign, no renal angle tenderness.
How do you do the liver span? You said liver span is 11 centimeter. How do you examine the liver span? Just can you just explain? How will you do?
yes, sir, like upper border is by the tidal percussion, sir, by percussion method, and lower border is by palpation method. So we have from the mid axillary line. I believe we have to percuss from 4 intercostal space, sir.
Yes.
And if the dullness is noted, there is liver. If it is from there, we have to keep percussing down, and then after the costal margin, we have to palpate the borders of the liver and we have to measure from the place where the resonance was noted and till the lower border palpated.
So it should be in the midoxillary line, it should be in the
Midoxillary.
midoxillary line. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So now what is the significance of liver span?
Yes.
Sir, if like usually like for this age, ideally the liver span should be 7 to 9 centimeter.
Yeah. See, my question is like if you are going to palpate the liver below the right costal margin, then I'm convinced that it is hepatomegaly. Why should we do a liver span then?
Liver span. Yes.
And in some cases, physiologically, liver will be pulled down, sir.
Push down liver. You want to know what's question?
Down
Yes,
liver,
come on. Push down liver. Good.
Yeah.
It means that actually the liver is not enlarged because of lung pathology or pleural pathology. Liver is pushed down. That okay?
Yes.
So to differentiate that, we should definitely look for liver span, and the liver span is age dependent, right? So in each age the span differs. So that also you have to need to have a chart for it. And one more question, like the spleen, as you said, it was 5 centimeters below the left costal margin, and it was up to the umbilicus, right? So can you like grade the spleen for me?
It's a moderate splenomegaly.
Yeah. So can you say the grading?
In case of mild, it is less than 3 centimeters, sir.
Oh.
In case of moderate, it's 4 to 7 centimeter below the left costal margin. More than 7 centimeter is massive splenomegaly.
Okay. So if you're not able to palpate the spleen as such, will you do any other maneuvers to try to palpate it?
By Middleton method.
Hook technique, sir.
What will you do to palpate the liver if it is not palpable? The liver to become palpable normally, you should enlarge how many times? So normally, even with the minimal splenomegaly, you may not be able to palpate the spleen below the costal margin, left costal margin. So it has to be enlarged 3 times, 2 to 3 times. So what sir is asking, if I want to see the minimal enlargement of the spleen, what maneuvers you will do?
By hooking.
Hooking? Which position you will keep the patient from where you go?
Yes, Dr. Hariharan, you were trying to say. You can say.
Yes.
Right lateral.
Right lateral position by hooking method we can.
Yeah. So the hooking method. So that's what you explained as Middleton maneuver, right? Fine. Okay. Right.
Good.
Auscultation, bowel sounds are normal, no hepatic, splenic, renal, bruit heard. Examination of other systems, cardiovascular system, S1, S2 heard, no murmurs, respiratory system, upper respiratory tract, nose, oropharynx, tonsils are normal, lower respiratory tract, normal, vesicular breath sounds heard, no adventitious sounds, central nervous system, normal. Case summary. A 9-year-old male child, second born to non-consanguineous parents, has prolonged fever, anemia, cervical lymphadenopathy, splenohepatomegaly, purpura. Diagnosis is acquired disorder of the hematopoietic system involving all 3 cell lines, probably hematological malignancy. Differential diagnoses are infections like infectious mononucleosis, HIV, miliary TB, brucellosis, toxoplasmosis, cytomegalovirus infection, Kala-Azar, connective tissue disorders like systemic lupus erythematosus, systemic onset juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Management.
So, wait, at this stage, yes, sir. Anand, sir, you can.
Yes, sir. So you can just go to the previous slide of systemic examination.
Go to previous slide.
Yeah, in our respiratory system, so we had some complaints in the respiratory system.
Yes.
Right?
You told dyspnea.
Yeah. So you complained about some, there was some respiratory complaints in this case, but on examination, things are normal. Yeah. So is it possible that that minimal exertion leading to respiratory distress could be attributed to something else? Now that we have a whole perspective of this case.
Sir, it can be due to anemia, sir.
Yeah.
It can be due to anemia.
Anemia, yeah. So that is a possibility. Yeah. So
Apart from that,
could it be, did you inquire about any postural change aggravating the respiratory distress?
No postural, no dyspnea, sir, when postural changes and
Okay. Okay.
what way, why sir is telling about postural change? What way it is significant in this case?
In case of liver enlargement, it can.
So the organomegaly, when in lying posture, may push up and make the patient discomfort. Okay. When he is in sitting posture, he may be relatively comfortable.
Yeah. And like one more point I just want to highlight is like, so there is an entity called mediastinal syndrome. Mediastinal syndrome, where a mediastinal mass can obstruct the respiratory tract, and it can present exactly like whatever you said in this case. The distress can be because of very minimal exertion, and the respiratory system can be absolutely normal. So that possibility also we should be taking into account, and it's very common in ALL, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, presenting as a mediastinal mass. Right?
So the patient, even if he feel dyspneic or discomfort in breathing, without involvement of both cardiovascular and respiratory system, patient can be, for which sir has given you either due to mass in the abdomen or due to any thoracic mass, can also give obstruction. Nodes or something like that can obstruct and have the difficulty in breathing. Okay.
Oh. Fine. So your differential diagnosis is now finally infections, connective tissue disorders. Okay.
First is hematological malignancy.
Hematological malignancy, right? So now how are we going to proceed further?
Through investigations like complete blood counts
Okay.
and peripheral smear study.
Okay. So now in these two investigations, what are you going to look for?
Sir, hemoglobin, WBCs, and the platelet count, reticulocyte count, and in peripheral smear study, we'll see the any blast cells are there, and LD bodies for and Donny cells and atypical lymphocytes.
Yeah, very good. So you're going to look for any increase in the total count, anemia, and thrombocytopenia. So evidence of pancytopenia, basically.
Yes, sir.
And in peripheral smear, you're going to look for blasts, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. So infection, is there any significance in infection?
In total count will be reduced.
Infection, leukocytosis.
Yeah, there can be leukocytosis, but may not be very high count. Anything more than 20,000 or 50,000 for that matter can be towards malignancy rather than infection. Right? Fine.
Chest
Yeah, for infection, any other investigations you would like to do?
Investigations.
Infection.
ESR we can do, sir.
CRP and ES.
Yeah, so still you can go for ESR, CRP, and other cultures also, right? You mentioned about the blood culture.
Yes, sir. Down urine and blood culture.
Fine. X-ray. Yeah, I can proceed with investigations.
Yes, sir. Chest X-ray PA views, ultrasound abdomen, Montauk's test, retroviral screening.
So in X-ray chest, what do you look for here?
Sir, for like for any TB, miliary TB infiltration, infiltrates present.
Any other thing?
Any other thing? It is very common with your symptom which you are told. Now sir also discussed with you.
Mediastinal mass.
Mediastinal lymph nodes, sir.
Mediastinal widening. You have to look for apart from cardiomegaly and other things. Okay.
Fetal position. Ultrasound abdomen.
What will you look for in the ultrasound abdomen?
Ma'am, liver, ma'am, hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, and para-aortic lymph nodes,
Para-aortic lymph nodes. Fine.
Monto's test, retroviral screening after counseling, monospot test, urine and blood culture.
What is monospot test?
Ma'am, it is a heterophil agglutination test done for infectious mononucleosis. Ma'am.
Okay.
Also for cytomegalovirus.
Yeah. Just one more point. Like if you suspected infectious mononucleosis, what would have been the clue you would have got in your examination?
So tonsillar exudates will be there, sir.
Okay.
Then lymphadenopathy or hepatosplenomegaly.
Yeah, anything specific to the spleen?
Please.
Spleen
Tender spleen will be there.
for firm spleen.
Yeah. So
Clinic rupture or like
yeah, so it's a very soft spleen. Yeah, very soft spleen. Can even go for a splenic rupture just when you're trying to palpate it. Right. Fine. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Brucella agglutination test and culture, anti-nuclear antibodies, RF factor, anti-double stranded DNA, X-ray skull, ocular evaluation, IgM, ELISA for CMV and toxoplasmosis, bone marrow aspiration cytology, and lymph node biopsies.
So what do you expect in X-ray skull and why do you want to take it?
Ma'am, if so, in Langerhans cell histocytosis punched out lesions will be there in X-ray skull.
Okay. What about ophthalmic evaluation?
In ophthalmic evaluation, in a CMV, we can see owl eye appearance and toxoplasmosis, chorioretinitis.
But anything in specific to malignancy which you are suspecting?
Which we are commonly suspecting.
Your first diagnosis was malignancy. Any ocular finding specific to malignancy?
Retinal
Retinal?
hemorrhage.
Yeah, retinal hemorrhages can happen.
And also, can you get proptosis?
Yes, sir.
Proptosis can occur some malignancies in hematological malignancy. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just one comment. See, based on your primary diagnosis, which is malignancy in this particular case, your investigation can be like ordered, like specific to diagnose, to confirm my diagnosis, and then go for ruling out the other differential diagnosis and supportive investigations. So in that order, I would have actually gone for bone marrow aspiration or biopsy earlier, rather than lower down the order.
Yes.
That's one comment. Otherwise, you have covered all the investigations. And I would also like to know what else you will do in the bone marrow aspiration cytology. So what are you going to do with the aspiration?
To look for hypocellular and hypercellular.
What are the tests you will order with the aspirate?
Peripheral smear.
No, bone marrow aspirate.
Yeah.
You get the aspirate. What are all the tests you send for?
Culture for cytometry.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, can proceed. Yeah. Yeah, and what are the tests you're going to do in the bone marrow? Yeah. So one is you're going to look for cytology, right? You're going to see it under the microscope, look for the blast count, right? And one more thing is you want to send it for 3 important tests. One is your immunohistochemistry, right? To find out which lineage the malignancy is going to be, right? And you're also going to do cytogenetics and molecular assay. So all these things, you just know that it is done, right? So all these things are very important to find out the exact lineage of the malignancy, which is going to help in management as well as in prognosticating it, right? So high risk, intermediate risk, or low risk. All these things are going to be based on this analysis. So flow cytometry, immunohistochemistry, and cytogenetic analysis are done in the bone marrow aspiration or biopsy, right? Okay, right, fine. Yeah, proceed.
The treatment part, if it is came as leukemia, will classify based on immunohistochemistry and according to tumor markers and advise appropriate chemotherapies. Lymphoma will classify and stage, and after that staging will give appropriate chemotherapy. Infectious mononucleosis, rest and symptomatic therapy, prednisolone for complications will advise. Disseminated TB, anti-tubercular therapy will advise. Toxoplasmosis, pyrimethamine, sulfadiazine, cytomegalovirus infection, ganciclovir, and brucellosis, trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, kala-azar, pentamidine, systemic lupus erythematosus, prednisolone immunosuppressants, systemic onset juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, prednisolone, disease modifying anti-rheumatoid drugs will advise.
So you thought of very various diagnosis of which malignancy will be the most probable. So we
Yes,
have to verify. Second could be a chronic infection like tuberculosis.
Yes, sir.
Also we have to keep in mind. Sometime rarely malaria also can be there. Chronic malaria can be there because anemia is there. Fever is also there. Hepatosplenomegaly is there. So these things you have to keep in mind. So with this, you have to do the main investigation for leukemia, as I told. Yes. So really very nice presentation for a UG level. Both your history and your examination and your approach towards the case also was good. Now,
Dr. Singaravelu and other panelists, I think it doesn't seem to be a UG level discussion. You have gone on to the stage of a PG level discussion.
thank
Both,
you.
and I must thank you for putting our students onto the platform so that they are all trained.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all for your guidance and encouragement. Definitely will is making good. Anand sir, you can proceed.
Yes, sir. So it was definitely an overall good presentation. Good presentation, and the approach, as our professor rightly pointed out, has been done correctly. An approach to a prolonged fever without a proper focus, and the investigations which we'll have to do, and the differential diagnosis which should be thought of. So that has been put forth correctly. So that was a definitely a good presentation, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. Anand sir, one thing, though I am not a panelist, one thing I would like to compliment. Compliment is when we were students, we had a process who used to tell anemia for evaluation, fever for evaluation, and lymphadenopathy for evaluation. If these things are all done exactly, and we will be left loose and we will be appreciated. So any anemia, the approach for evaluation and investigation and then management. This is what our process used to teach us.
Yes, madam.
Yes.
Stop sharing your PowerPoint. Stop sharing. As madam rightly told, the approach should be hepatosplenomegaly with fever and hepatosplenomegaly with lymphadenopathy and hepatosplenomegaly with anemia with fever. So you have to think in a different line so that you can easily reach your diagnosis. As madam rightly told, if the child doesn't come with history of fever, only lymphadenopathy and hepatosplenomegaly. Your point of thinking will be in a different scenario. You will not think of infective etiology very commonly. Though fever can be present in malignant disorders also, but the mass enlargement will be more in this thing. If it is infections, fever will be predominant, with organomegaly will be less. So if it is a hematological condition, where fever will be less, anemia will be very prominent. So, as rightly said, you have to approach a case depending on the priority of the symptoms as well as your examination findings, based on which you have to always think of common diagnosis. Common things are always common, rare things are always rare. Like Kala-Azar, brucellosis and other things you have included, it is only just for theoretical point of view, and we don't commonly think of all these conditions. Here we'll think of one is malignancy, if at all, of which leukemia will the commonest. Of, as I told, ALL is the most common. Even lymphoma is less likely, because among all the malignancy in childhood, ALL is the most common thing. So you have to always, with the fever, hepatosplenomegaly, with the lymph node, with minimal anemia, you have to think of leukemia, which is always called age group also in favor with leukemia. And you should not forget to examine, being a male child, genital examination should not be missed. You are rightly told, because testicular involvement is very common. If you miss this and you treat, and the common site of recurrence, then the child will. Like that, CNS involvement also you have to keep in mind. That is why you have taken X-ray, skull also you are told, that also you have to tell. Apart from doing LP and all that, these things you have to keep in mind. So that when you offer a differential diagnosis in any system, always give the common differential diagnosis, then go for rare. The investigation also, as Professor Anand rightly told, the common investigation particular to that common diagnosis which you are making, the investigation should be done. The rare causes investigation should be told in the last. Even if we miss that, we will not bother much. But the common thing should not be missed. Srilata madam, your comments.
So the approach to the case is right, as everyone pointed out. And a detailed examination of history, as Anand sir pointed out, detailed history of what investigation was done, a better detailed history in that would have given some more insight into that thing. Probably a complete blood count and a peripheral smear was done by somebody else also, and they would have pointed it out. That could have given you a better idea earlier, before we started examining the child. Even before that, we could have made a narrow down the possibility, and other things were absolutely fine, and the investigations, whatever was pointed out, and sir has highlighted what an undergraduate should take the line in. And coming to leukemias are more common childhood malignancy, and that too ALL is the most common. The more common age group is usually between 2 and 5 years of age, though it can occur at any age, including the adolescents. And they usually present commonly with 3 to 4 weeks of illness, and sometimes even 2 months also. They commonly present with features pointing out to bone marrow failure, like anemia, presenting as fatigability, breathlessness as in our case, and tiredness. Okay, and neutropenia, where even though the cells or WBCs are more in number, they are ineffective in their work. So that there is infection and inadequate response by the WBCs to any infections. That causes fever, prolonged fever, and also the inflammatory mediators also contribute to the fever. And they can also present with thrombocytopenia, because the megakaryocytic line in the bone marrow is also suppressed, and they can present with bleeding. And as you rightly pointed out, that the stools are normal in color and there is no major bleeding inside to take you in the direction of portal hypertension. And they can also present with features of extramedullary hepatopoiesis, as in our case, like splenomegaly, hepatomegaly, and lymphadenopathy. And you should know why they can have even bone pains. You have pointed out that not cause of bone pain in malignancy is stretching of the periosteum by the expanding bone marrow. Also, the joint pains can be because of leukemic cell infiltration in the joints even. So that is the most common cause. And on occasions, we have come across children who refuse to walk with fever on and off. Only that, no anemia, no hepatosplenomegaly, so many times like that. And finally landed up with a diagnosis of malignancy, especially acute lymphoblastic leukemia. That can be a rare presentation. And CNS manifestations can also be rare ones, but the most common, as you said, is bone marrow failure features and expansion of the extramedullary hematopoietic organs. And usually the etiology is usually not known, and several things, especially syndromes. We were talking about mother's age and Down syndrome. Children with Down syndrome are at increased risk of leukemia. So syndromes associated with chromosomal aberrations are more commonly associated with malignancy. They have a slightly higher risk of developing leukemia. And certain translocations can also be associated with leukemias. Parental smoking and pesticides also are attributable, but still it's not proven. And coming to the bone marrow examination too, towards pointing out at leukemia, the myeloblasts and lymphoblasts can be differentiated both morphologically by the size of the cell and the type of the cell and the staining, and also by immunohistochemistry methods using markers, as you said, tumor markers. Certain markers are specific for B cells and certain markers are specific for T cell. Whether it is B cell leukemia, pre-B cell, mature B cell or T cell can be classified, and AML will also have certain markers. Tumor markers are now the best method to differentiate the lineage, whether it is a myeloid lineage or a lymphoid lineage, to make a diagnosis of lymphoblastic or myeloblastic leukemia. And cytogenetics is very important, more in a prognostication. The more number of chromosomes in a blast cell, like more than 50 numbers, hyperploidy has got a good prognosis, whereas hypoploidy, less than 45 chromosomes in the blast cells, is associated with a poorer prognosis. And other things, prognostic factors, poor prognostic indicators is one is age, where children less than 1 year and more than 10 years have a comparatively worse prognosis than children between 1 and 9 years, 2 and 9 years, like in our case. Probably our child will have a better prognosis. But a male sex has a comparatively worse prognosis than a female sex. And number of white blood cells at the time of presentation. If it is more than 50,000 per cubic millimeter at the time of presentation, it carries a worse prognosis. And translocations like Philadelphia chromosome and other translocations like 411 will have a poorer prognosis, for which this cytogenetics will help. And coming to the investigations, whatever you have pointed out will suffice in case of investigations. And how is immunization important in children with a diagnosis of leukemia? One is they may require blood component therapy, for which they should have been screened for hepatitis B and given appropriate vaccination prior to the onset of illness or during remission. Maybe hepatitis B, immunoglobulin, and other immunoglobulins can be given when you want to protect them from blood component therapy induced infections, because they are more likely to get component therapy during the course of treatment. And other things are management. Management, usually we follow several of the protocols like BFM protocol and other MCP 841 protocol. So many other protocols are there, and that is based on just the concept is, remember, ICCC. Okay, it happens in 4 phases. The treatment is given in 4 phases for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. First is I for induction. So we start induction chemotherapy to prevent and maximally control the number of blast cell proliferation. Second, you give CNS prophylaxis. Most children, even though CSF analysis does not show any leukemic cells, they need CNS prophylaxis. Some of the leukemic cells will be lodging somewhere in the CNS and they may relapse if not taken care of. So it is a must, even in low risk as well as in high risk cases, we need to give the second stage as CNS prophylaxis, where either radiotherapy, cranial radiotherapy, or intrathecal methotrexate is given. And next C is the consolidation phase, where you take care of all the resistant cells so that they don't get resistant to the chemotherapeutic agents. You keep on giving medications to make them exposed to so many medications that they don't develop any resistance to the chemotherapeutic drugs. And last is the continuation of the maintenance phase, where we continue the chemotherapy for prolonged periods and to prevent that relapse and to have a higher percentage of cure. You just know that it is ICCC, induction, CNS prophylaxis, consolidation, and attenuation phase. So this will suffice. And one more thing, what about relapse? Relapse means recurrence of the malignancy during or after completion of treatment, some years ahead also. So relapse has to be managed very carefully because all those blast cells would have been exposed to the several chemotherapeutic drugs, and like antibiotic resistant, these resistant to chemotherapeutic drugs also. So that should be taken care of by separate protocols. And bone marrow transplantation is very good and has got a very high success rate when given after the second remission. Remission is recovery from the malignancy after treatment. One time after they recover, they are left alone. But second time they come with a relapse. Second time malignancy, they come with either again blast cells, the peripheral smear, where we call it bone marrow relapse, or they can come with CNS relapse with CNS findings of raised intracranial tension or seizures, where you get CSF malignant cells, or they can come with testicular relapse. These are the three areas of from where the second time acute lymphoblastic leukemia after or during treatment can come out. So after chemotherapy of the second cycle, second relapse, that is the first relapse or the second time occurrence of malignancy, bone marrow transplantation is ideal, for which age-matched sibling and bone marrow matched sibling or parent should be available. So this has a very high cure rate as far as ALL is concerned. And cure rate nowadays is very high with all good supportive therapies like taking care of the nutrition, taking care of the suppression of bone marrow following chemotherapy, like colony stimulating factors and immunoglobulins and prophylactic and preventive therapies for infections, and of course bone marrow transplantation. They have given a very high cure rate. And we do see many children living into their adolescence and adulthood after having chemotherapy for ALL as children. And it will be very nice to see children living as long life after ALL. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You have given a very elaborate. So you are all fortunate to have a complete lecture about ALL, how to approach, how to manage complications and other things. Madam has extensively discussed. Thank you, ma'am. So with this, we will hand over to Dr. Tirumurugan.
Thank you, sir. I think they have done, your students have done a fantastic job given the short time.